But it's mainly Islam that's doing the running at the moment in all Western societies and feels that it has the wind behind it, certainly the strength. And it partly does so through a method of intimidation, which I find intolerable, which is basically, I mean, I don't know if you saw that case recently in North England where there was a poor boy. How old was he? Something like 12. And he was accused of damaging a Quran. And in this obscene bit of footage, the leadership of the school, the local police chief, and some imams all sat at a long table and in front of the cameras explained that they were trying to address the problem and that they were trying to address the problem in a peaceful way. And so I'm sorry. This is a kid. This is just a white kid in Britain who suddenly, like before the judges of Islam, and there was a police chief, typical supine sod, sitting there nodding along with the elders of Islam at the table. We're trying to do everything to pacify community relations. Sorry, community relations? A book got scuffed, not for the first time in a British school, the books got scuffed around the edges. And this kid is at the center of a potential nightmare. Just like the teacher in Batley. Yeah. The teacher in Batley who showed one of the Mohammed cartoons, as I understand it, in a discussion and a debate in his class about...
He's still in hiding.
He's still in hiding. Yeah. And that school didn't stand by him. And the police didn't stand by him. And when those bearded thugs turned up outside, they should have been arrested. They were engaged in intimidation. Is a really, really important point to make, if I may. Because the British public, like so many Western publics, are so demoralized. And I want to say to them, man up, stand up, have some damn pride in yourself. What happened to you? What happened to you? We were strong. We were powerful. We were principled, and we weren't easily pushed around.
From the battlegrounds of British schools to the front lines of cultural warfare, Murray exposes the West's terrifying surrender to extremism. Watch as he rips apart the facade of Islam's religious accommodation to reveal a calculated power grab that's transforming our society. Shocking revelations ahead as Murray connects the dots between playground prayers and civilization's collapse, followed up by an emotional ending note on some of Israel's more inspiring stories.
I want to ask you about multiculturalism. Catherine Birbalsing's Michaela School is currently going to the high courts. She's being sued by Muslim students who were forbidden from paying. Students with a legal aid, I should say, of 100,000, at least 100,000 pounds behind them. Birbalsing's
Where did that come from, by the way?
Well, quite. Just like the UN, we're paying for it. The school's rated. I haven't been to Michaela School.
I've been. I've been a couple of times. It's a superb school. We should probably just explain the nature of the school because
you'll do a better job than me.
Well, so in the last decade, the Conservatives set up something similar to the charter school system in the US, where because state education, like private education, frankly, in the UK and the US, is so abysmal these days, they wanted to improve school choice. And there were these things called free schools, like charter schools in the US. And parents, it's not about fee paying. It's about the parents selecting the school and the money that the government pays for that child going with them to that school. But it gives parents a choice of the type of school that their child will be sent to. Now, if you go to the Michaela Academy, as I have done, you will see like one of the very few hopes we have in our country. Okay, I mean, every child is almost every child is from an immigrant background. Almost every child is from a poor background. They are being given the best start in life anyone could have. They're getting a better start in life than kids at Eton or Harrow or Winchester. The education at this school is superb, and it's because of the ethos. And it's because of the ethos of Catherine Birbalsing, which is about discipline, about respect, but earned respect. It's about working hard, motivation, the children behave beautifully. They learn beautifully. They're taught amazingly. And they've had results that are unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
The exam results of this school are so extraordinary that they've already gone to the top of the league. Now, just quickly, Catherine Burblesing has done that in the face of all opposition, from the Labour Party, from left-wing councils. One building she wanted to buy was sold by the local council for less than she was offering when she was starting the school because they didn't want to sell it to her school.
Why did they take such umbrage with her?
Because she would show them up.
Mm.
She would show them up. Or the teaching unions and everyone else in America and in Britain and elsewhere, they are so shown up when somebody comes along and says, actually, it's not a matter of more money. Mm. It's not a matter of bigger pensions for teachers. It's a matter of excellence and the right type of discipline and education. And this school has been the subject of more attack. I mean, literally people handing out leaflets at the gates to try to intimidate pupils. Children.
Why are we allowing taxpayer-funded legal aid to be used as a weapon against one of Britain's most successful schools? This isn't about religious freedom. It's about power. The same pattern repeats across Europe. Demands for prayer rooms in schools, segregated swimming pools, and halal-only cafeterias. When will we acknowledge that these aren't requests for inclusion, but rather tools for transformation?
So it seems like the case to me is one of she is attempting assimilation. So she has all the kids saying, God save the king in the morning. They all eat vegetarian food because there's all different religions. There's Muslims, there's Hindus, there's Christians. So it's the way that they can break bread together. It's all designed intentionally so that they can be together. So also, is, as I've said, praying is banned. Now, for me, this is
banned.
Banned?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you said bad.
Banned. Sorry, banned. Yes. Although I would say God Save the King, a hymn, but sort of a prayer.
It's the national anthem. Yeah.
If it was a Christian prayer, do you think it should be banned also? And okay, well, let's put it a different way. The French style, where you can't wear a burqa or even a crucifix in public buildings, it's this kind of secular attempt to deal with the multiculturalism.
Yeah.
So this Burblesing's doing a version of that. Is this the correct route to addressing that problem?
Well, just to finish that bit, the reason why this case is so egregious is because the school is a secular school. Okay, it is a secular school. There isn't a prayer room for Christians and a prayer room for Muslims and a prayer room for Hindus, and there aren't religious holidays celebrated. When a parent sends their child to the school, as I understand it, they sign up to the rules of the school. And if they didn't like them, you can go elsewhere. When a child is signed up for a school, it is a contract. Both sides agree to it. This child, any other child, knows what they're going to. They're going to a secular school. And it's a very sensible thing, to my mind, that Catherine Burblesing did, because if you don't take the secular approach in an area like the one she's in, and you're starting from scratch, you will be subject to every religion and denomination making its own demands. And before you know it, you're not getting any education done because you're spending the whole darn time arguing about things that shouldn't be argued about in school. So, and this is a totally egregious case because the pupil and her parents knew what they were signing up to, and they have deliberately, in my view, used this as a wedge issue against a very successful secular school, and they know what they're doing. And by the way, Muslims and others have done this in a lot of places. They push against the secularism, and they make more and more demands, and they're never demands for the Hindus, they're never demands for the Christians, and so on. I would say that if a child of a Christian family insisted on having a Christian prayer room in a school they knew had been set up to be secular, the same should apply. No, we're a secular school. If you and your parents, and it's always the parents, of course, if your parents want this to become a non-secular school, go to a different school. but it's different in different places. There are Christian schools. One of the few things the Church of England still does is run a lot of Church of England schools. If you go to a Church of England school, you shouldn't be surprised if there are, well, actually, these days you would be surprised if there's anything Church of England about it. But anyway, you shouldn't be surprised if there was something Church of England about it. Same thing with Catholic schools. Mm-hmm. If you go to a Catholic school, you sign up to a Catholic school, don't be surprised if there's some Hail Marys somewhere along the way. I mean, that's the deal.
In the UK, demands for religious accommodations in secular institutions have increased astonishingly. Yet, as Murray astutely points out, these demands overwhelmingly come from one direction: Muslims. Where are the Hindu students demanding prayer rooms? Where are the Buddhist students insisting on meditation spaces? This isn't about religious freedom, it's about power dynamics. The £100,000 legal fund backing this case didn't materialize from thin air.
So people don't realize, they realize in France, they don't realize in Britain, this is a very specific tactic. Always to go in like this, create the wedge in which you push your religion through. Mm-hmm. And I would argue Britain is in a weaker place than France about that, because we have a complex, well, every country has a complex situation with religion. But France has a very clear one, which, whatever your views, it's been clear since 1905. And
what do you think about in England religious schools? So be they Muslim schools, Jewish schools, where it's a Christian nation still, although now minority Christian, we're still a Christian nation. Do you think that there should be Muslim schools, Jewish schools, and Christian schools?
Well, this is a really hard one, actually, because the way I would say it is, you start from where we are. One of the extraordinary things about France is that every now and then it reboots itself, and the Second Republic becomes the Third Republic, and the Third Republic the Fourth, and perhaps Fourth the Fifth, and we don't do that in Britain. I mean, the nature of common law and the nature of laws continuing by precedent, and we just have a different history with religion, and I think you sort of have several options in front of you. One is to try to start again from day one. I think that would be very hard in Britain. We are where we are. I mean, in Northern Ireland, there's still problems with Catholic and Protestant schools and so on. And, our islands have had a complex religious history, as I say, like everywhere. I mean, I would like the predominantly schools in Britain to be advocating the laws and the culture of Britain. I would actually like everyone in the country to have an understanding of where we've come from. I was rather sad, to put it no stronger, to see that at the coronation there were certain politicians who couldn't sing the hymns.
Did you feel good about the different religions being represented
I thought that was rather tastefully done in the end. I thought, greet them at the end, or have that moment where they all take a part. Fine. It's a way for Britain to adapt to the era we've found ourselves in because of mass migration. It was a rather British compromise solution, but the service was a full-on Christian service, as it quite rightly should be. You get into tricky terrain with, I mean, if there were other denominations, if there were any denominations that were teaching basically separation from the state, then I would not be in favor of that. Broadly speaking, I think Muslim schools teaching Islam as a school ideology is not a good idea, because I think it encourages segregation.
So not for the content itself, but just for the fact that it's different from
I think it's different.
the British worldview.
Yeah, and I think it ghettoizes Muslims who are already ghettoizing themselves to a great extent.
Most Muslim children attend Muslim-majority schools. This self-segregation isn't accidental. It's systemic. The Trojan horse scandal of 2014 revealed how certain groups attempted to Islamize secular schools through legitimate channels. Murray's concern about Muslim schools isn't about religious content per se. It's about parallel societies developing within Britain. The Cantle report following the 2001 riots warned about communities living parallel lives. 2 decades later, have we heeded this warning?
In the UK. then people say, well, what about Jewish schools and so on? I don't see Jewish schools in the UK as being anything other than, in most cases, centers of some excellence, and I wouldn't want to stop those schools because, why should everyone have to pay a price for one particular religion having problems? And it does. Islam has problems. Bigger problems than other religions. Have other religions had problems in the past? You bet.
Do you think Islam's compatible with British values?
Islam, the religion?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm not ducking the question, but first of all, you have to say, what are British values? Mm-hmm. And I think British values are currently morphing. And they've morphed in our lifetime. I knew what they were very clearly when I was growing up. Again, we all knew the hymns. We knew the stories and the songs of our country. We knew the legends of our country. Now, because of mass migration, we have to do things like, British identity is about being kind and tolerant, and saying that diversity is our strength, for instance. This sort of mouthwash. And so if you say, is Islam compatible with British values? I say British values as they are at the moment and as they're evolving, probably. But Islam, the religion, makes extremely big claims for itself, as all religions do, but is also, in our society and in societies around the world, a religion which has a lot of desire to assert itself. It isn't actually these days Catholics who are making the kind of push that is happening at Catherine Burblesing's school. It's Muslims. Mm-hmm. There have been cases when there was one case with a theatre that was putting on a play some years ago that was seen as being a bit anti-Hindu, and there were some Hindus who took umbrage about that and tried to close the play down. I deprecate that. But it's mainly Islam that's doing the running at the moment in all Western societies and feels that it has the wind behind it, certainly the strength. And it partly does so through a method of intimidation, which I find intolerable, which is basically, I don't know if you saw that case recently in North England where there was a poor boy. How old was he? Something like 12. And he was accused of damaging a Quran. And in this obscene bit of footage, the leadership of the school, the local police chief, and some imams all sat at a long table and in front of the cameras explained that they were trying to address the problem and that they were trying to address the problem in a peaceful way. And so I go, I'm sorry, this is a kid. This is just a white kid in Britain who suddenly, like before the judges of Islam, and there was a police chief, typical supine sod, sitting there nodding along with the elders of Islam at the table. We're trying to do everything to pacify community relations. Sorry, community relations? A book got scuffed, not for the first time in a British school, the books got scuffed around the edges. And this kid is at the center of a potential nightmare.
We're witnessing what French sociologist Gilles Kepel calls the salami slice strategy, taking British institutions apart, one demand at a time. The Wakefield Quran incident Murray references is particularly chilling. Picture this: a 14-year-old autistic boy, not only treated like a criminal before a makeshift Islamic tribunal, with British police playing along, but also receiving death threats from Muslims. Would this happen with any other religious text?
Just like the teacher in Batley. Yeah. The teacher in Batley who showed one of the Muhammad cartoons, as I understand it, in a discussion and a debate in his class about...
He's still in hiding.
He's still in hiding. Yeah. And that school didn't stand by him. And the police didn't stand by him. And when those bearded thugs turned up outside, they should have been arrested. They were engaged in intimidation. But I've seen this as a pattern all my life. People are really vulnerable to a tiny bit of physical threat. Really vulnerable. I remember discussing this once with a friend who was much involved in the Iraq war. And I I was with him in Iraq, and I said, what are the things that have surprised you, as it were, about how badly this has gone? And he said, one of the things I just underestimated was we could have troops on a street, but if a man opened an alcohol shop in Baghdad, say, and a local Islamist militia came by one evening and said, you're going to shut this down, it would be shut down. Like, even the law of American troops being around was not as strong as a local militia. Think of the way that's happened all of our lives. A little bit of physical threat. It's an old mob tactic. This is what a lot of Islamists have done. They say things like, I get this all the time from these blowhards. They're all like, well, I'm not going to kill you, but I can't promise I'm holding my mate here back. And I don't like that tone of voice, and I won't be spoken to in it. But a lot of people are very intimidated by that. Nice publishing house you've got here. Shame if anything happened to it. Nice school you've got here. Shame if anything happened to it. Sorry. Are we going to be intimidated by mobs or thugs or mafia-like gangs? I don't think we would if it was an Italian mafia. So why should we if it is an Islamist mafia? No, I mean, where did is a really, really important point to make, if I may. Because the British public, like so many Western publics, are so demoralized. And I want to say to them, man up, stand up, have some damn pride in yourself. What happened to you? What happened to you? We were strong. We were powerful. We were principled, and we weren't easily pushed around. The British public were not easily pushed around, and we were quiet about it. But when we were pushed too far, we did something about it. Now, when did we become this so easily pushed around that the police can be pushed around? 1 year it's take the knee. 1 year it's just stand back as people are screaming in your face at an anti-Israel protest in London. 1 year it's sit on the imam advisory board of the local primary school whilst his poor boy is being made to suffer like this through a struggle session. What's happened to you? What's happened to you, Britain? It's just horrible to see the really great virtues of the British public just being whittled away at, and our good decency taken advantage of time and again.
During the Blitz, Londoners faced actual bombs with stoicism. Today, institutions crumble before Twitter hashtags. The 2021 Leicester riots saw police standing by as mobs controlled streets, unthinkable in previous decades. When did community relations trump the rule of law?
What happened to us? Well, I know what it is. It's been beaten down. And in some cases, some people, it's been beaten right out of them. Well, not me, and not millions of others. Not us.
Sounds like you've got the Strange Death of Europe Part 2 draft right there. Douglas, I want to end on a more wholesome tone. You've got a beautiful column at the Free Press where you write about poetry. I know it's one of your great loves. We are in the Holy Land. Israel is deep in the British imagination. It's in the hymns we sing. It's the poetry, whether it's Blake. I was reading G.K. Chesterton's book on Jerusalem, or him coming from England to Israel in 1920, coming here. What does it mean to you? What does this Holy Land mean to you?
Gosh. When you first come here, as I did some 20 years ago now, it's extraordinary. And it's extraordinary for lots of reasons. One is everything is so visceral and everything rings. I remember first time I was here and I flew over the valley where David slew Goliath. I remember the feeling in Jerusalem the first time I was there. Somebody gave me directions to get to somewhere. I think it was the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. He said, "Oh, you take a right at the Via Dolorosa. That's better than you take a left at Hammersmith Broadway." I remember once saying to somebody, a beautiful church, Palestinian Christians actually, that had been built nearby. It was the first church for a while, been built in this particular area. And I said to somebody, I said to one of the locals who had finished building the church, I said, "What's the name of the church?" He said, "The Church of the Transfiguration." I said, "That's a wonderful name. Why did you choose that?" He said, "Well, in the Holy Land here, we tend to name churches after the site to the nearest biblical story, and the Transfiguration happened there."
Wow.
And I could give 1,000 stories like that. It's an incredibly powerful land because you know it's a place where something happened. And whether you're a believer or a non-believer, it's of course, in some ways, it's sometimes powerful in a particular way more for a believer. But even for a non-believer or a doubter like me, it's just filled with resonances and power and reverberations. I mean,
Murray's self-description as a doubter while being deeply moved by the Holy Land speaks to a broader Western condition, what philosopher Roger Scruton called the sacred without the supernatural, a recognition of profound meaning without necessarily accepting supernatural claims. This connection to Israel isn't just religious, it's cultural.
I once came back from a conflict here, and I remember I slipped into evensong in a cathedral which I was nearby, and one of the first lesson was included just by chance. It was just that day. Was and lo, the peoples of Syria did wage war upon the Israelites. You just go, well, I've seen that again recently. And it's enormously powerful for that reason, among others. If there are other reasons, and there are many, too many really to list, one is I see this as being a country which is a triumph of, as my late friend Jonathan Sacks once said, it's a triumph of, he said, probability over possibility. Possibility over probability. That was it. It's a country that has, I mean, there's been obviously 3,000 years of claim to this land by the Jewish people, and it's the only place they really have as home. And I mind, by the way, very much and I know what they're doing, the enemies of this country. I know those people who think they're doing good, but you think, this is the only place in the world where Jews are actually safe. Why? Because it's the only place where they're allowed to defend themselves. And the lesson of history is the Jews can't give their defense to anyone else. You go to the ghetto in Venice, or you go to the various scenes of atrocities across Europe, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, you know that the Jews can never again, ever, be in a position where their security and their safety is in the hands of anyone but themselves. And that's a very powerful and important thing. And when people say, "Oh, I'm not singling out Israel," sorry, mate, you are. Yeah. You just are. It's the one place the Jews are allowed to defend themselves. You are singling them out. And so it's that.
I felt it coming here, the journey leaving London and seeing all the torn hostage posters everywhere, the whole journey all the way to the airport.
Disgusting.
And then coming here and the hostage posters are untouched.
Yeah.
And there's graffiti says "fuck Hamas." And I always thought that England was a safe place for the Jews. Now I know there's moments of history where it's not been a safe place for Jews, but it's a hell of a lot better than what happened on the continent or in Russia or in anywhere else in the world. Maybe America was better, but coming here, In this moment, I don't feel that way about England. Many Jews who are terrified in England. And so I absolutely agree with you that this is the only safe place for Jews.
And it's the place where the Jews will fight. And they have to. And my view is that it's quite wrong for other people to tell them how they should fight and how they should survive. I mean, as I said to you at the beginning, if you go up to the hills in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, the place we're sitting in is visible. And if the West Bank was handed over in its entirety to the Palestinians, the place we're sitting in would be being shelled right now. Now, when people say, how dare they have an occupation in the West Bank? It's not an occupation, first of all. But secondly, if it was, that's why.
Jonathan Sacks' formulation of Israel as a triumph of possibility over probability cuts to the heart of Israel's existence. A nation of 9 million, surrounded by 400 million hostile neighbors, maintaining not just survival, but flourishing. This defies every geopolitical probability calculation.
And, I was speaking to an Israeli friend the other day about, we had a wonderful evening just talking books and history and Israeli politics and Israeli history. And we got onto the subject of one of my favorite authors, Stefan Zweig. And Zweig, of course, committed suicide in 1943 in Brazil, which was the last place he was able to run to on his flight from the Nazis. I had a friend who met him in London in 1938, and he couldn't stop in London. He had to keep going. And he ended up committing suicide in 1943 with his wife. And I've often wondered about that. Now, if you read his autobiography, Die Welt von gestern, the world of yesterday, you'll see, in a way, it was rather like Primo Levi. It's impossible to think of how you could survive after what you've been through. But, I mean, Zweig saw his books burned early, and once your books are burned when you're an author and you can't be read and you can't be published, you're sort of dead in a way. It's a pre-death death. But I was speaking to this friend about this, and he said the problem for Zweig was that he wasn't a Zionist. He met Herzl, Theodor Herzl. It's a very interesting description of his meeting with Herzl in The World of Yesterday. But he didn't ever sign up completely with Herzl's vision of the re-establishment of the Jewish state.
Was he against it, or
very complex, a very complex story? But he was a Viennese Jew whose world had been completely burned, and who saw it coming. And that's one of the worst things. He saw it coming, and he could do nothing to stop it. But I understand in a way now why he did it, because his was a life entirely without hope, in a world without hope, even though the war was turning by that point, turning against the Nazis. But he had no long-term hope. And this country is a long-term hope. See, it's where history meets the future. It's where worlds meet. I mean, this country, it gets so much attention in part because there's always this thing of like, how the hell did the Jews manage to make such a thriving, vibrant, successful state out of people from all across the Middle East and North Africa and the diaspora returning, and Ashkenazi and Sephardi, and how did they form this state that's blossomed so much, and let alone compared to its neighbors, and the one darn place in the region that doesn't have any oil, and it's just, to me, an amazing testament to what human beings can do with faith and hope. And then there's that thing, of course, which Joe Biden has a story of Golda Meir, who's back in the news a bit at the moment because of the movie. Joe Biden has quite a nice story for Joe Biden about the one time I think he met Golda Meir when the first time he was here, first time he came. And he's been good in this conflict, actually, Joe Biden. That's an old school Democrat, actually. They get this. They know this. Some of the younger ones are idiots, but
this had been when she was prime minister.
This was probably just after.
Is he that old?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
While Saudi Arabia sits on 17% of the world's proven petroleum reserves, Israel has transformed itself through human capital alone. Israel ranked in the UN's World Happiness Report 2023, surpassing many oil-rich nations despite the challenges posed by ongoing conflicts. While Zweig saw no hope in 1943, Israel stands today as living proof that Jewish determination and resilience can overcome even the darkest chapters of history.
Oh, yeah. he could have met Weizmann. He has a rather lovely story that he says Golda Meir at some point, sort of took him by the arm, and they were talking about Israel's defense and what the threats were and so forth. And Golda Meir apparently said took Joe Biden by the arm, and she said, well, we have a secret weapon. And he thought she was going to say it. And he said, well, what's that? She said, we have nowhere else to go. And, if the enemies of this country had their way, and I am not using hyperbole at all, if the enemies of this country had their way, they would finish the job of Adolf Hitler. Okay? It's as serious as that. It's as serious as that. The people chanting from the river to the sea in London and other places, whether they know it or not, would be finishing the job of Adolf Hitler. I sometimes think to myself, if these people who do that ever got their way, I would pity them, because they would one day wake up and realize they were the Nazis. They were the ones who did it. They were the ones who, after the Jews were chased out from all of the other countries in this region and were slaughtered by the millions in Europe, then destroyed the Jewish state. So I hope to God those people never get their way, for lots of reasons. But I don't think they will, because the thing you see in this country at the moment, I spoke to a guy the other day who said, is an older Israeli guy in his 60s, a workman, and got chatting, and he said, I owe the younger generation in Israel an apology. And I said, why? It was incredibly moving. He said, I thought for years, and I said for years, the younger generation spend all their time on TikTok, Instagram, and they're flippant, they're frivolous, they just like to go out partying in Tel Aviv, blah, blah, blah. They're not like the previous generations. He said, I owe them an apology. October the 7th happened. They all went and fought. They enlisted, over-enlisted. It was 140% enlistment straight after October the 7th. And if you speak to the people, I've spoken to a lot of them, soldiers fighting, families of soldiers who died, and they're all people like you and me, Winston, by the way, except braver. All of them. I was at the home the other day of a young woman who was 23. She'd had some friends who were at the Nova party. She wasn't there herself. Immediately after the 7th, she insisted on enlisting. And her parents asked her not to, said she didn't have to, she could do other things, she could volunteer and so on. And she enlisted. And on the 12th, she went down to Sderot. Where I've been many times, and she went down and there was an air raid, as it happens all the time in Sderot, missiles fired from Gaza. She got out of her car, as is the protocol, and one of the missiles landed on her. And she was a photographer. And this country is filled with thousands and thousands of stories like this. But here's the thing.
The Hamas Charter explicitly calls for the killing of Jews, not just Israelis, but Jews worldwide. When protesters chant from the river to the sea, they're advocating for the elimination of the world's only Jewish state. Israel faces enemies who celebrate the murder of civilians. the former Iranian President Rafsanjani once called Israel a one-bomb country, suggesting it could be destroyed with a single nuclear weapon.
Thousands of stories like this. But here's the thing. These are young people like you and I, or you and I used to be. But they've all stepped up. And they've all stepped up for their country and for their people. And that's why I say, I look at these people. I speak to these people. I listen to these people. And I think your contemporaries in America and Britain are wasting their lives. There was a young girl of 21. I was with at a dinner the other week, and she turned out to be an expert on Yemen, intelligence expert. And I just said to her, your contemporaries in America are being expensively educated into ignorance and malice. And you're a real person. You're a real person. Wow.
It's been amazing coming here and seeing everyone. I thought leaving Britain, and I've spent a lot of time in America as everywhere where there's such disunity and division, and encouraged, whether it's because of diversity or whatever reason, but whatever, we're massively fractured, and with all our attention on this country and this conflict, I expected coming here would be coming to the storm, and it's unbelievably calm here because everyone, then they're suffering, but they're all focused, and they all know that they have an objective, and they all have the humility to find their part to play in that. It's been absolutely astonishing.
It's inspiring, isn't it? It's deeply, deeply inspiring, because it's always that question: would we step up? Would we do it? And for us, it's still a hypothetical. Pray God, it is always a hypothetical for us in Britain and in America and the rest of the West. Not a hypothetical here. They've been tested again. And they haven't been found wanting at all. They've been weighed in the balance and found to be magnificent. And that's why the world shouldn't be thinking, why doesn't Israel behave more like the rest of the world? In my view, the rest of the world should be thinking, why aren't we more like Israel? And the final thought on that, it's because Israel lives in reality. Israel lives in history. And what I mean by that is not just the past. I mean, in that events are going on all the time. In Britain and in the West in general, we live in this post-historical dream still, where there are no enemies, where the jungle isn't there. And you can't afford that here. Here, the people who are down the road from us having drinks tonight and dancing aren't dancing in a trance. They know that they're only dancing because their brothers and sisters and friends tonight are fighting Hamas in Gaza, and are standing guard at the northern border, and are patrolling in the West Bank. So you can't take it for granted here, and they don't, but they still live. And that's the final just wonder of this country and its people, in my mind, is it goes back to that very beginning, the first commandment: choose life. Choose life that you and your descendants might live. That's what they're doing every day.
Every Israeli innovation, every scientific breakthrough, every medical advancement happens under the shadow of existential threat. When Hamas leaders openly declare, "We love death more than you love life," Israel's response is not just to survive, but to thrive. Isn't it time the West learned from this example? If you too are as inspired by the young Israelis as Murray is, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and share your views in the comments below.